Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of True Story Live. We've got a good one for you tonight. We try to always have a good one for you, but we have the privilege of hearing from Marisa, who did the write-up for tonight, Nez Lover. And tonight's topic is Take Courage. Sounds good to me. So we'll get into that in just a few minutes. And also, if you stay tuned to the end, we have a little surprise for you. We're trying to set aside some time for just a short little surprise at the end. So please stay tuned for that. Probably about 15, 20 minutes before we normally end the broadcast. So as host, I will try not to take too long with the questions. So make sure and allow that time. Do the best that I can. All right. So as usual, we like to introduce the rest of the panel. I'll start with myself. I'm Jason Cripps. I go by Cripps mainly, but I'm cool with you referring to me in any way you want. That's kind and loving. But I'm the host of the broadcast, and also joining me are my friends and family and panel members. And we'll start by introducing my wife, Jen. Jen, say hello. Take a minute and say hello to the peoples.
Hello, peoples. Great to see you guys. Good to be here. Really looking forward to this write-up, and I always enjoy a cup of authenticity and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And Nez is definitely pouring that out today for us.
Yes.
Yay! So I'm excited about that.
Wonderful.
And if everybody doesn't know, tomorrow is a certain gentleman's birthday, Glenn Ayers' birthday.
Woo-hoo!
Actually, I guess it would be today because is that today then, Glenn? Yes. Happy birthday.
Today.
Aw, happy birthday, Glenn. If only I could give you something right now that I could shove through the computer. Aw, sorry.
Yeah.
What, a middle finger?
Sure, a birthday finger.
I could go get Mr. Spatula and administer your birthday spankings, but no, I was actually thinking of a gift.
Middle finger is a gift to some people.
Oh my gosh.
I'll just give you a bunch of validation instead. I know how much you love it.
Oh no, how about invalidation? I think you'd like that better.
Oh, sick bag.
Supposed to be a gift, Marisa. Supposed to be a gift.
Not torture. That's funny.
Wonderful.
Hey.
All right, so it will introduce the birthday boy next. Glenn from Australia. Glenn, take a minute and say hello to the peoples, please.
Yeah, hi. Good to be here. Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Short and sweet.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're glad that you're here and glad that we're able to be here on your birthday. So thanks for showing up. There's a lot of people that consider their birthday important to do their own thing. And so thanks for being a part of the broadcast with us tonight. Also, last but certainly not least, we have the writer of the write-up for tonight, our friend Marisa from Ohio, and Nez Lover of the Nez Lover channel. Take a minute, say hello to the peoples if you would.
Hello to the peoples. I know I sound like Jen. I like how she says that.
I do too.
Welcome, everybody, and happy birthday, Glenn. Oh, I love you. Thank you, everybody who's come tonight. Thanks, everybody who joins us while we're in progress. Thank you, everybody who may be lurking and not participating in the chat, although we do invite you to participate in the chat. And thank you to everybody who takes the time to catch the replay, and certainly please share it out on your social media as you are so inclined. At some point during the broadcast, I'll be sharing a few links, and one of those links will be the art stream I did on my channel with our own Starling Swallow, our own Jen, who joined me. So if you want to check us out having fun with our art on my channel, we invite you to do so. All right, I'm looking forward to getting hip deep in my own write-up. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to do this, you guys.
Yeah, we're excited about it, and we're going to get right to it in just a minute. But first, Jen, if you could take a minute just to say hello to anyone in the chat, and then as people pop in, we'll make sure and say hello to them as we go.
All right. We have got Celine just popped in the house. Hey, Celine.
Celine.
Celine Dion. No, not Dion. Jamie's in the chat. Alex is here. Hey, Alex. Glenn and Nez are in the chat. Hey, guys. And Lori. We've got Lori here. Good to see you guys. Thanks for popping in.
Yeah.
I know people are still adjusting to the earlier time, but they'll start trickling in.
Yeah, last week and the week before, it seemed like about the normal time. The people in the chat kind of doubled, so we still have had a wonderful turnout. It just starts out with fewer people, and that's okay. We know that people listen to the playback, and we're glad that you are listening. If you're hearing our voice, then you're listening to the playback too. So thank you for that. We always invite you to be part in the chat. For those that I like Maurice's term, lurking, and it's okay that you don't participate, of course. We're happy that you're even here. But please think about joining us in the chat. It's just we would like to have more conversations with more people. And we also encourage people to answer the questions that the panel is answering too. And so that we can get to know you better, get to know your perspective and your thoughts, and we can share that with others as well. So thank you for that. So without further ado, I just want to say Alex is back again. I said last week that he is a friend from when we first started True Story Live, and he's popped in now and then. But this is first time in a while that he's been here back-to-back weeks, and I just wanted to acknowledge him, and he's really good gentleman, and everyone just make sure and make anyone coming in welcome in the chat. All right, without further ado, I hand it over to Marisa, who is going to read her own write-up, and I'm excited to hear her voice and to hear what she has to share.
Let's do this. It's called Take Courage, and the song selection is from The Wizard of Oz, with the Cowardly Lion singing If I Were King of the Forest. It'll bring you a smile if you haven't seen it in a while. So please check that out. Sure, we've talked about courage before, but tonight I want to share some of my true life story regarding fear and courage. First, some quotes. Be strong and of a good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he that doth go with thee, he will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. That's Deuteronomy 31:6 KJV. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart, all ye that hope in the Lord. That's Psalms 31:24 KJV. True courage is not the brutal force of vulgar heroes, but the firm resolve of virtue and reason. Alfred North Whitehead. Mistakes are always forgivable if one has the courage to admit them. Bruce Lee. Faced with what is right, to leave it undone shows a lack of courage. Confucius. The opposite for courage is not cowardice, it is conformity. Even a dead fish can go with the flow. Jim Hightower. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. John Wayne. Being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving deeply gives you courage. That's Lao Tzu. Courage is resistance to fear, master of fear, not absence of fear. Mark Twain. It requires more courage to suffer than to die. Napoleon Bonaparte. Have the courage to act instead of react. Oliver Wendell Holmes. What would life be like if we had no courage to attempt anything? Vincent van Gogh. Courage is knowing what not to fear. Plato. You can't test courage cautiously. Annie Dillard. And lastly, it takes courage to grow up and become who you really are. E.E. Cummings. Right after I was done breastfeeding my son, baby daddy decided to get a sitter and take me to a concert for a well-deserved night out. During that night, I had consumed alcohol, did some cocaine, and some acid. Not long after that, I discovered I was pregnant again. Consumed with fear, my mind filled with thoughts of birth defects and diseases and disabilities. I was sure that was brought on by my night of careless indulgence. I considered having to raise not just my son, but a disabled child in addition to that. Now, my faith in God was existent back then, yes, but I had wandered far away from Him. At that time, in what I can best describe as pure cowardice on my part, I chose to terminate the pregnancy, which was also a horrifying experience. I swore I would never do that again, and I never did. Now, I do believe that terminating a pregnancy is murder and very wrong. I broke one of the commandments. I took an innocent life. I had to bring that murder to Jesus and ask forgiveness. And He forgave me. But there's not one day that goes by that I am not sorry for what I did. Years later, at age 41, I became pregnant with my daughter. No drinking to excess and no hard drugs involved this time. Other than the gestational diabetes diagnosis gotten from a blood test the day after baby daddy took us to a local donut shop for a treat, everything was fine. My daughter was born healthy and normal, but the diagnosis of autism didn't come until after her age 2 vaccinations. As per my fears, I now had to raise a child with a disability, something I had sought to avoid all those years ago. Thankfully, by this time in my life, I had come back to Jesus and knew that as afraid as I might be, God had me and my daughter in His hands. Although it's been very difficult and challenging, we are still here and doing better than ever, very happy and very blessed. What did I learn from all this? I learned that when God wants me to face a certain challenge, I best just face it. I learned I could stoop to horrible decisions made by fear. I also learned that if I have the faith that I say that I do, then there is no reason for me to be motivated by fear anymore. Either I trust God or I do not, and I do. Some questions I have for my co-panelists and the listening audience. What is one of the most frightening experiences in your life? What time in your life did you make an important decision motivated by fear? What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face the fear and press forward? How do you encourage others to not be motivated by fear? What is at the root of fear? And lastly, what is one of the best lessons you have learned from facing a fear? At this stage of my life, I now know it is okay to acknowledge that fear exists, but I do not have to be driven by it. Now I see it as an opportunity to learn and grow, even if it involves hard yards. I believe everything happens or is allowed to happen for a reason, and there is not one thing that I go through that God doesn't know about or can't get me through. My children are proof of that. And if you want to save the quote for the last, Jason, go right ahead. That's your call.
Sure.
I will turn the keys over to Cripps.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Nez, for being so transparent. As Jen had said at the beginning of the broadcast, we definitely appreciate that. And everyone knows that, that we do. None of us is frightened. We try to have courage in sharing things that might be difficult for us to share. But at least those of us on the panel and the kind of chat that we have, everyone is so understanding. Everyone is so supportive and encouraging, and it places us in an atmosphere, at least here on this channel, where we can be open and honest. We can be transparent. We can be authentic. And some places, in my opinion, we can't do that. I mean, we could, but the reactions are very different in other atmospheres. This has been very healthy environment, and we appreciate all the people that are listeners to the broadcast, and especially those that are in the chat tonight, for helping provide that kind of place for us. We've heard from people in the chat that they feel safe here, and that delights our hearts. And I am speaking for everyone. I'm taking the liberty and speaking for everyone on that point. But thank you. Okay, so I just want to say hello to a few people that popped in while Nez was eloquently reading her write-up. We have Ajot, who popped in the chat. Also, our old friend Janet is in the chat as well. Came to wish Glenn a happy birthday. We're glad that she's here. We miss you when you're not here, Janet, but we're just glad you're here. As I always say, you can come when you want, leave when you like, and you're always welcome. So the invitation is always open. Also, Debbie S., our longtime friend who always tries to be here and usually says hello at the beginning and the end, which we're grateful for. And Rachel, our friend Rachel, is here tonight as well. So we have a full boat, and we didn't even have to wait until the normal 8 o'clock hour. So, gosh, guys, thank you for being here, especially for celebration of Glenn's birthday. All right, so let's dive right in. Okay, so first thing I wanted to just briefly, I love these quotes, Naz. You really dug up some, in my opinion, some great quotes on the topic for tonight. I love the Bible quotes. Be strong and of good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Deuteronomy 31:6 KJV. Another Psalms one, which is good. There was one. Bruce Lee says mistakes are always forgivable if one has the courage to admit them. I found that very true and striking. Everyone makes mistakes, but it's when you share it, I believe, when you share it with others, that you can have the healing if there's any injury from your mistakes, and helps you forgive yourself if you admit them rather than carrying it around like bad luggage. That was a good one. Let's see. John Wayne, courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. Isn't that the truth? Fear is not the absence of courage. It's dealing with fear and moving forward anyway. I didn't make that up. That's a quote. It's my own paraphrase there. Also, Mark Twain, courage is resistance to fear, master of fear, not absence of fear. Yeah, that's similar to what I just said. And then this one from Napoleon, it requires more courage to suffer than to die. Wow. How many people live this life in a place of suffering, a place of only surviving and not living, and they live a long time like that. I think that's a very good quote. So all of them are good, but those are the ones that rang a bell of truth in me the most. So there we go. All right. So we're going to dive right in. So the first question, I'll read what Nez said right before the questions. What did I learn from all this? I learned that when God wants me to face a certain challenge, I best just face it. I learned I could stoop to horrible decisions made by fear. I also learned that I have the faith that I say I do. Then there's no reason to be motivated by fear anymore. I either trust God or I do not, and I do. First question coming out of that is, what is one of the most frightening experiences in your life? Great question. What is one of the most frightening experiences in your life? Anyone have a burning desire to start with this question? No? I'll go first. So this is interesting. I've had two experiences which I've talked about before on this broadcast, which I would think would be frightening. In fact, leading up to these two events, I had imagined one more than the other, but I'd imagined ahead of time, what if these things happen? How would I deal with these things? So it's kind of a cheat because they should have been frightening, but they ended up not being frightening, but I feel like they should have been. So the first one was when I drove cab back in the 90s, early 90s, 93, 94, something like that. I drove cab for about 3 years without incident, but on the night that I quit, I was robbed at gunpoint. Gun put to the back of my head, was sitting in the back seat. And I had thought this through many times because it's a sad reality of driving cab. It's a dangerous occupation. And during that time, there were a lot of, when I say a lot, comparatively speaking to the amount of people that drove cab, a staggering amount of people that had been robbed. One guy was hit on the side of the head with a bottle and robbed. He lived, of course. Had another one that was killed. There were 2 that were killed around that same time, and a lot more were beaten and their money taken and things like that. So these were all amping up at the time. And I didn't spend a lot of time in fear worrying about it, but it did run through my mind. And this guy had gotten my confidence. I was not afraid. I did not have any, weird concerned feelings with this particular individual. In fact, before that had happened, I had had many times that I had someone in the cab that gave me a weird feeling and nothing happened. So don't ask me to explain that. I don't know. But this was a planned thing on his part. So got to where we were going, didn't expect it, heard a click, put the gun to the back of my head, told me to give him, he had paid for the trip ahead of time. It was $40. And he told me to give him his money back. And I did. And I was more calm than I ever remember being before. Now it was frightening when I think about what actually happened. It is frightening, but in the moment I was not frightened. I was peaceful. And that still to this day, that was a long time ago and it still blows my mind. The other event was, had a sinus infection for 6 months, and long story short, they, found that I had a deviated septum. I had an operation on my sinuses, cleared everything up, and I had been healing for a while, and I thought I was out of the woods, but I woke up about 2 a.m. Early one morning, and I was gushing blood from my nose, a lot of blood, and I couldn't stop it. I went to the bathroom, put a towel up, and towel just filled with blood.
Oh my gosh!
It was not stopping. They rushed me to the nearby hospital, which is about 15 minutes away. And when I got into the emergency room, they could not stop the blood. They tried inflating a balloon inside my nostril to stench the bleeding. Staunch? Am I saying that right?
Yes, staunch, yeah.
Staunch the bleeding, and nothing was working. And they had me hooked up to the devices, to monitor my heart. And the monitor started beeping. And I felt cold, really, really cold. And the room seemed to kind of vibrate and start to go dark. And I feel like I went out. I don't think I died. No one said, "Hey, you were dead," clinically for any period of time. I didn't see any light or anything like that. But I thought I was done. I thought because of all the blood that I had lost and because of feeling weak, and they couldn't stop the bleeding. I had already made peace with my maker. I had said goodbye, and there was no fear. But thinking about that ahead of time, you would think that when you're facing death like that, especially something unexpected that happened, just like with being robbed at gunpoint, that there would be some fear. And you could say, well, you have faith and you believe, and even if you're wrong, you still obviously you have this faith about your eternal soul, and so there's no worry. But it was a peace that I cannot generate myself. And so all the times that I would imagine it ahead of time in both instances did not match the actual experience. It was like a piece outside of me or inside of me, however you want to look at it, kind of took over, and I was completely serene and calm when it should have been frightening. I'm sorry, Nez, that's a little bit of a cheat. I cannot think of anything that should have been potentially as frightening as those two experiences, but those are the things that came to mind. So my apologies. That's
No
not
worries.
actually answering the question. All right, who would like to go next? All right, I'll pick someone. Let's ask Glenn. Glenn, what was one of the most frightening experiences in your life, if you have one?
Yeah, this is a difficult question to answer because I think when most things that really are going to frighten you come on like so fast, you really don't get a chance to be frightened because you have to deal with what you got to deal with in the moment. So I've had some of those, but so really the answer is I really can't put my finger on something that I would say was frightening as such.
Yeah,
albeit that they could have been life-threatening.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting.
Now,
but I did want to ask. Oh, okay. You were going to say something?
I was just going to say the way you talk about bronze snakes seems a little frightening, but
yeah, but I haven't. The only ones I've been confronted with are the babies, and I knew that what needed to happen there.
Right.
So
what are you going to say, Glenn?
I'd be shitting myself if one. I was confronted by one. That would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly as I just said.
Right.
But thankfully, not yet. But there's quite a few of them here, so it's going to happen, isn't it? At some point, I suppose.
I hope not, for your sake.
Oh, me neither. Oh,
yeah.
You and me both. I mean.
Right.
So I just want. So pretty slack answer, but I wanted to ask Nez. I learned that when God wants me to face a certain challenge, or how do you know which challenges God wants you to face? I just can't get my head around that one.
I would say that when it's something that is so soul shaking and moves you to the point of holy shit, at the seriousness of the situation, that lets me know. For me, that lets me know this is something that is happening for a reason, and I need to deal with this. It's not going to go away. It needs to be confronted. So that's how I.
Yeah.
Cool. Does that answer your question, Glenn?
That's not what I was expecting, but that's Nez's answer. Thank you.
Okay.
It's the best I can do, my dear.
Certainly. I do want to say hello to a couple of people that popped in while we're talking. First, the Conscious Evolution channel. I believe the name is Dana, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Welcome. Glad that you're here. And also our new friend. She says she's part of the Ned Two-Timers Club. Joni's Not So Fast. We are so delighted to see you here. Glad that you're here, and it's okay that you're late. You will learn that the way that I look at it is if you're here, you're here, and if you're late, you're late, and it's okay. No guilt.
We're just glad you're here.
We're just glad you're here. That's how we feel about it. We've had people come in the last 5 minutes, and we're glad they popped in. They can listen to the playback, but yeah, we just like people to be here as much as they can to be part of the conversation. That's okay. So thank you guys. Welcome, both of you. Yeah, Dana says I'm still adjusting to daylight savings. Yeah, aren't we all? Like right now, it's light outside, where normally by this time it's starting to get dark. And anyway. So thank you guys. All right. Glenn answered, I answered. So let's ask Jen. Jen, what is one of the most frightening experiences in your life? What do you have to add?
I'm going to share two. One was when I was like 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. It's a little personal, but I don't remember exactly what I had done. I think it had something to do with the dishes and me talking back to my dad. But my dad put his hands on my neck and slammed me up against the wall.
Yeah.
And I think when it's a parent, that lays their hands on you, I know for me, it was terrifying. And it's such a trauma because your dad, especially being a girl, your dad's like, the world gives this idea that your dad's supposed to protect you and from people like that. But my dad was a really big source of fear, and it just kind of exploded that day. And my mom interrupted and got me out of the house and into the car, and I was crying uncontrollably and just terrified. And he came out the front door and was walking toward the car. And I had grown up seeing him, punch things and yell, and he'd spank us and pull our ears and knock on our heads. And he just was a very scary guy and bigger than me. My mom was yelling at me to lock the door. And it was like one of those older cars where you had to push down the lock on the door. It didn't have automatic. And I couldn't move. I was just terrified. And part of my fear was, and this is how I've lived most of my life, I was more afraid of hurting his feelings, like him seeing me lock the door, showing him that I was afraid of him, than I was with protecting myself. It was very, very messed up. The second one was when I was 13, I fell off a horse. I was horseback riding with a friend. A horse had gotten out of its pen. It was like within our neighborhood. There was a farmhouse and a pasture. And we ended up getting the saddle from the particular house to put on her because she had jumped the fence and she was eating the grass next door. So we decided to ride her while we were in this field next door before we brought her back. And it was a cinch saddle, which I had never seen. I grew up Western. And so it was like a metal ring with like a strap. And so I had no idea. Like we just tied it into a big knot. But I hadn't ridden enough to know that horses usually stick out their belly when you saddle them up, and you need to walk them around and they suck it back in, and then you've got to tighten the saddle. So on my second run, the saddle flipped under the horse's belly and I fell off. And she was a pretty big horse. I don't know how many hands she was, but she was pretty tall. And I was like 4'11" at the time. And so I fell in slow motion. It was the weirdest thing. And I went to catch myself with my left arm, and I landed on my arm, and it hyperextended, dislocated, and shattered my elbow.
Wow.
And I remember just laying there. I actually vaguely remember having a little bit of an out-of-body experience, like seeing myself from above.
Wow.
Which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
But when I sort of came back to myself, my arm was bent back the wrong way. And I was just in complete shock, and I had to sit up. My friend was telling me it was just dislocated and she wanted to pop it back in the socket.
Oh no.
But I had to pull my arm back around straight, and I could feel the bones rubbing together. And so I knew something was really, really wrong. But then I had to go, in an ambulance to Richmond, which was like an hour away, and I had to have surgery and just so many needles and just a lot of fear. And that was a really, really tough time. And then after my surgery, like I had hardware put in my elbow, pins, plates, and screws. And I had a lot of physical therapy, and that was really scary too. It's just weird because when you're that age, you think you're invincible. And so when something like that happens to you, it's like you're met with the reality that, oh my gosh, my body breaks.
Yeah.
It's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going through that whole thing, physical therapy, the surgery, being in the hospital, being on medicine that makes you feel really weird, and just the accident itself, it was very, very scary. So those are my two.
Wow, those are good ones. Thank you, Jen, for sharing
that.
Nez, you're up on this one to answer your own question. What is one of the most frightening experiences in your life?
Well, other than what I just mentioned in the write-up, another time would be when I was abducted and raped at gunpoint. So we've got the gunpoint thing in common.
Yeah.
Although, as terrifying as that was, that was under someone else's control, not mine.
Right.
What makes the experience I shared the most frightening because it was my own decision.
Right.
But in that moment, those moments of going through an abduction and being held up at gunpoint and being raped, I felt a peace, like you explained, that if I just remained calm,
Yeah.
that this would be over soon.
Yeah.
And the most important thing was to just be safe, not
Yeah.
to agitate the person. I mean,
Right.
this was my thought process, as clear as
Yeah.
it could be in the moment.
Right.
He had made sure that my phone was, he had taken it from me. I couldn't, call anybody. I thought about, I think he excused himself for a minute to go to the bathroom or something, and he'd had my phone. I thought of just, well, what if I just leave the car? It was like at a rest stop or something like that, and but it was still some place that had some people, but I didn't know anybody there. I thought, what's my chances of getting help in enough time? What if he came after me? What if he made
Yeah.
trouble and hurt other people? I just didn't see that scenario playing out very well.
Right. Yeah.
And after he did what he didn't dump me or anything. He took me back home as if
Wow.
nothing happened.
Wow.
I was praying the whole time. And this was before I had a strong walk with the Lord, but
Sure.
God certainly had me that day. So that'd be the second most, I would say, one of the most
Yeah.
frightening experiences I've gone through.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's horrific. I'm glad that you made it through there to be here with us today. I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say briefly before we move forward, I am fascinated by survival stories, and there's a couple shows out there, but one, I Survived, is one that a lot of people
Oh, it's a
probably have heard of.
great show. Yes, great show.
I've watched every episode of I Survived that exists, and I'm just fascinated hearing people tell the story of how they survived some horrific event. And I have, on occasion, ran across people telling their story that had this similar experience, that whatever they were facing, they felt a sort of peace. So this should be terrifying, whatever their story might be, but there's this peace. Now, not all these people that feel the peace are believers. So in the Bible, it says the peace that passes all understanding. It's a promise of having the Holy Spirit. And it's kind of confusing for people sometimes because they might be going through something and they don't feel that peace. So this has been a constant question. I feel like I have resolved it now, where before I would feel it sometimes and not feel it other times. And I think that when we face death, or we face some kind of horrific tragedy, or what could be a horrific tragedy, either way, there can be a peace that comes over us that is outside of ourselves. And I have experienced that for myself. Nez just shared an experience where she felt that. I've heard other people talk about it too. And it's just so fascinating to me. It's not something I can explain. I mean, I can theorize all day long, but it's just one of those things. It's one of those mysteries of life. What is caused by that, when our bodies are made specifically to operate fear, fight or flight, or fawn, these reactions, these biological reactions to danger. And when we face certain things, it seems like you would be in that place. Your body would fill with adrenaline and all this other stuff to make a decision whether you're going to fight the person or try to get away. And sometimes it's the opposite of that. It's no adrenaline. It's a peace, literally, that passes all understanding. It just is fascinating. Anyway, okay, continuing. Next question. What time in your life did you make an important decision motivated by fear? What a great question. What
Can I go
time in
first?
your life? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my gosh. First marriage for sure. It's so ridiculous to me now, looking back and thinking about it, that how just afraid I was of getting too old, getting married when I was older, missing out on having a family. And I think I made some decisions, and they just were not good. It was just not, it wasn't, I think I had convinced myself that, oh, this is the person God has for me. It's amazing what we can convince ourselves of, especially with red flags flying. Yeah. So that would be mine. First marriage for sure. Fear of being alone, fear of missing out what life had for me. Fear of not getting married.
Yeah.
It was a pretty strong fear.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, we were just talking today about how society breeds this desire to, get married and that someone else is going to make life better for you. We were talking about that. I've talked about that before. But yeah, fear is a motivation to get married and to overlook red flags.
Yep.
I had some of that too with my first marriage. Not in the same way maybe that you did, but I had it in. I'm getting older. I've been praying for this. There's not much time left. That was so silly. Now that I look back at it, because I've known people get married in their 60s, 70s. They find the right person. Maybe they were married before, maybe they weren't, but they're happy. And they're not happy because the other person. They're happy because they're at a place of maturity in their life, and they're adding the person. It's not a completion of them, but it's an enhancement. And I think that's the right way to look at it. But that's a topic for another time. Jamie says, I don't remember most of the scary things that happened to me because I shut down and my brain doesn't record them. I do remember our falling out of the car at age 3 or 4 and being in a car accident. Yeah, car accidents are scary. Thank you for sharing, Jamie. I've been in a few car accidents. They're scary. But like Glenn said, sometimes car accidents, that's an example of something that happens so fast, you don't really have time to register to the fear, right? Someone hits you and you spinning around maybe, or fortunately I've never had a car flip, but I've ended up in a couple ditches due to someone running into me, or just, being hit. Been hit from behind a couple times. Been hit from the side a couple times. One time I didn't get hit, but the guy ran me off the road. 2 times that happened, once in Michigan in the snow, on a narrow road because of the snow drifts on each side. And then another time in rainy conditions, the guy lost control of his vehicle and came into my lane. And I was 17 or 16 at the time. I overcorrected and ended up in the ditch. And by the way, my dad was angry at me because I ended up in the ditch because I lost control of the truck. I'll never forget that. Like, not concerned about my safety at all. Again, that's a topic for another broadcast, probably. My dad not being concerned about my safety. Okay. I think that's all that was shared about that particular question. Okay, just as a reminder, guys, in the chat, if you would like to answer any questions, we would love to hear it. Just putting it out there. You don't have to, of course. Glenn, what time in your life did you make? What time in your life did you make an important decision motivated by fear?
Geez, I'm boring. I'm going with the broken record. First marriage.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely correct. Well, I'm on board with each of you. That was motivated. That FOMO, fear of missing out, is a very big motivator.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're not that confident or you got your own demons. In my case, I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew I was getting myself into a difficult place, but I did it anyway, knowingly. And whilst hindsight's marvelous, why did I do that? Basically, that overrode the sensible part of me that says, "Don't be an idiot."
Yeah,
it's fear is a very strong emotion to be living with. Not a good one, but as each of us has learned, we didn't do it. We didn't do it the second time.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. It is palpable, fear. It can be intense, and it can cause people to make decisions. I like that Nez is not specific about what decisions that people make out of fear, but in almost every broadcast that I've heard, she tells people, don't make decisions out of fear. I think it's a wonderful thing to say to people, because, people feel fear and they make decisions out of that. And a lot of times it's not a good decision. So that's a very important thing. Okay, so I did mention the marriage thing, but I'll add one to the pile here real quick before we move forward, and that is that and it's kind of a long story, but I'll make it capsulize again because we want to save a little time for that surprise. But back when I was in my early 20s, one of the worst things I did, I had a keyboard that I had stolen, and I had been trying to sell it. And because it was a stolen keyboard, I had a friend of mine take care of it. And he gave it to his girlfriend. Now, the story he told me was that he had sold it for me and that he was going to give me the money, but the money never came. And the truth was that he just gave it away to his girlfriend because she wanted a keyboard and he gave it to her. But I had been wanting, again, like a lot of times, I had at the time wanted to escape my family and go back to Michigan and live around my grandparents in Gladwin. And I really desperately wanted to get away. I often wanted to get away from my family. And this has been a pattern that went on for a long time. And I was angry. And my quote unquote friend at the time, I knew how to get into his house. And so I lifted the back door, the sliding door, went in. And my plan was to take some of his stuff that would equal the amount of money that I would have made from the keyboard. All this stuff is stupid. It is one of the worst things I've ever done in my life. It is a one-time thing, but it's something that I did. It's part of my story. And so the guy I was with, whose idea it was to do this in the first place, his name was Charlie, and he was a cocaine addict. Now, I didn't do cocaine. That was not my motivation. My motivation was what I said. Not that it was right, but I wanted money to go to Michigan. I wanted to escape. And my friend had thwarted that, and I was upset about it. So he had what they call a fence, and we took the stuff to the fence. And instead of money, he gave me 2 grams of cocaine. I didn't know what to do with cocaine. I didn't use it. I didn't know where to sell it, but that's what he got for it. And of course, he did that because that's what he wanted. He got something himself for what he stole, because he stole some items that had nothing to do with me from the apartment, and he fenced those for himself. So the scary part is motivated by fear. I was staying with some friends, and my friend whose house I went into and took stuff to fence, he had come over to talk to me, and he said he wanted to, bygones be bygones and forgiveness and stuff like this, because I had told him the story of that it was Charlie's idea and that he had been the one to steal the other items, and all I stole was enough to pay for the trip to Michigan, which I never got, because of the cocaine. There's a lot of rough rubbing around or something.
Oh, Nez, is that you?
Oh, I'm walking upstairs. Sorry about that.
Okay. I'm not sure she knows how loud it is. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
So he wanted me to come outside so we could talk. And like an idiot, I go outside, and guess who's outside waiting for me?
Uh-oh.
Charlie. So he gets in my face and says, "You tell him the truth that I was not with you." And this probably could have fit the frightening experience. I was afraid of Charlie because he was crazy, not because he was a big, strong, hulking guy, but because I knew that he was slightly insane. I didn't know what he would do to me. So in that moment, I lied, motivated by fear, and said that he wasn't with me. And fortunately, that was enough, and they left. I have regretted that to this day because I lied. I did not tell the truth. And being a much more mature person, if something like that would ever happen again, I would tell the truth regardless of the consequences. But I was very motivated by fear of what he might do if I didn't lie and say that he wasn't part of it. By the way, just as a PS, my friend did later learn that he was there, and he told me that he got some kind of revenge on Charlie. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, So there's my very transparent story that I probably cannot be. I probably cannot be. What do they call it when you do a crime and they not penalized, arrested, or I can't. It's not thinking of the right word. Prosecuted. There you go. I probably couldn't be prosecuted. The statute of limitations probably is up on that, being some 30, 40 years ago. Not 40, 30. Anyway, all right, moving forward. Let's see in the chat. Let's see. Jamie says, yep, I wasn't ready to leave until I accepted what I was living in was abuse and wasn't going to change because he didn't want to heal so things could change. So staying 31 years in an emotionally neglectful and abusive relationship was motivated by fear for sure. Okay, so I read the tail end of that. But Jamie, thank you for sharing. I appreciated that.
Thank you for sharing, Crips.
Yes, thank you.
Well, these are good questions, and they help me want to share. Everyone answered that one, correct? I believe so. All right, next one. What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face fear and press forward? Wow, great question.
It's a really good question.
I know I just went, but I'll go first. It won't be super long. What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face fear and press forward? Fortunately, Nez, I press forward now, and it is because I have learned the way I've handled any kind of fear before, and that the story I just told is an example of that. I didn't like how that made me feel, the paralyzing fear and the reaction to it that was denying myself. I don't want that, and I don't like being in a situation where I feel fear, making a poor decision, and then later regretting it. And I've also learned how to handle fear better than I had in the past. So when I do feel fear, I definitely have had experience in how to deal with it more than I used to. And also I have the promises in Scripture about fear, about facing fear, and also in psychology, the idea of immersion and facing your fears. All of that is very real to me. So I don't freeze into an action. I push through things. And Jen can attest to this. You know, I've had a fear when I'm learning something new, especially job-related things. And even starting this new job, there was a little bit of anxiety and fear because it is something new. It is a different situation to move into, an office-based situation. I have been in that before, but it's new people, new experience, new time in my life, and I haven't let it stop me from going to work every day and doing what needs to be done. That's a small example. I'm sure other people have better examples of that, more fearful situations, but it is an example of not allowing it to put me into a place of inaction. Moving forward, it doesn't mean the absence of any fear. It doesn't necessarily mean that I all of a sudden don't feel fear at all, but it is a decision rather than being inactive or being frozen to press forward. What a great question. What do you think, Jen? What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face fear and press forward?
I think a little of both. Okay. I used to freeze big time. Sure. And I was with someone for a really long time that sort of catastrophized everything. Mm-hmm. So things that it was almost like I was trained to just get to a point where I freaked out about every little thing. And part of it was because I felt like I was in control of their response to whatever was going on, knowing that their response was going to be bad, that like the shit was about to hit the fan, small, medium, or large issue. So even when I left, something would happen. And my body just like internally, I look really blank on the outside, but internally I am freaking out, like stomach in knots, anxiety through the roof, heart racing, cold sweats, like the whole shebang. It's not fun. But being with somebody safe and that is an adult and can talk through things and listen and validate and have suggestions, like really good suggestions, has been wonderful. It's been wonderful because it's really helped me learn how to pull out of that kind of trauma response when things go wrong and know that I am part of a team within my marriage. Right. And that I'm not alone. We can tackle things together. Whereas the last 14 years that I was with my ex, I was always having to put out the fires by myself. Yeah. Like he couldn't be bothered. He'd flip out and get angry and punch things and break things and scream. And, it was bad. But when it came, all that energy he put toward that, not actually us being together and working toward a solution to the problems.
Right.
So I was sort of like his fixer, like if they had that in the mob, the fixer. I was the fixer. Yep. Oh my gosh. So it's much better now. I think every moment that we've hit that's been a little stressful, it's gotten better and better.
Yeah.
Like slowly, but definitely improved. So that's good.
Yeah. And we've had some times to practice that, haven't we, Jen? We've had some things come up, some fearful situations for sure.
Yeah. Like your van getting towed when my car was in the, oh my gosh.
That's exactly the one I was thinking of. If you want to, just take a minute and tell that story. I think that people would be interested.
So our apartment complex was getting paved and they had a map sectioned off of what days the parking areas were going to be closed in order for the people to pave. And so they kept telling us, you need to have your car moved by 7 a.m. But then at the last minute, one of the nights, I guess they began near our section. They started further down, but then we were like the second section.
Yeah.
So they the night before, people moved their cars, but there was a couple of cars in our section. And because I was really tired, I was like, I don't feel like parking far away and then walking. I had a long day. There was a couple cars parked there. And because I knew that they had told us they were going to tow the cars at 7 the next morning.
Right.
I was like, I'm good. I'm safe. It'll be fine. I can just get up early and come down and move my car. So we had a great night. We ate dinner. And the next morning I got up like at 6 to go down and move my car. And I walked down there. There's no van. None of the other cars that were there. It felt like the Twilight Zone. I felt like my body did that dolly zoom that happens in movies. I was like, what is going on? Am I awake? Like, what is this? And we'd only had one car and I had to work that day. And so my body freaks out internally. I go upstairs. I'm immediately shaking, cold sweats. It's just the whole shebang. And I thought Jason's going to be mad. I was trying to figure out how to fix it and not have to wake him up because I try not to wake him up with like super stressful situations. It's nice to wake up slowly and ease into it, but I was freaking out. Yeah. And stuff like this had happened in my past marriage. So I had a lot of like emotional trauma connected to stuff happening with cars specifically.
Sure.
So anyway, I finally, after like a half an hour of freaking out and praying and trying to figure out what do I do, and I called the office and left them a message just like almost in tears. And I was confused too, because I was like, what happened? Like they said they were going to move him at 7. What is going on? Right. And I also knew that it was expensive to get your car back from the yard where they towed the cars to, like across town. And we were so tight with finances. I was like, oh my gosh. And I think rent was coming up. It was a mess.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So I get Jason up and I tell him, and he was so patient and so good with just talking with me and helping me calm down and stuff. But it almost seemed involuntary. Like I didn't want to respond that way.
Yeah. But
it was like my body was off to the races before my brain could even catch up with what was happening. Right. So it was a good experience. It sucked. It was awful, but
it did suck. Yeah.
It was a good experience because each of those times that happens after I got out of that situation and been on this journey of healing, it's gotten a little bit better. Yeah. Especially with someone that's safe. So good stuff.
See? That's great. That's a great story to exemplify this idea. Now, I would say, Jen, that even though you were having those feelings, you did do the right thing, in my opinion. Even though you were fearful, you faced it by, not trying to do it by yourself. I mean, it doesn't matter to me that you took 30 minutes of this trying to deal with it on yourself. you did involve me, and you let me be a part of it, and we got through it. And to add insult to injury, as far as that story is concerned, that day they didn't even work because it had rained the night before. So they towed people's cars for nothing. And I think I've told the story before, but we did get the money back. I wrote the parent company that owns the apartment complex and explained to them and gave them all the documentation that told us that we had to move it by 7 a.m. And they decided, because of the night before, that people didn't move their cars and they had to have them towed, that they would do it the night before. And they did send out an email, but it was later on in the evening, about an hour or 2 hours before they actually started towing the vehicles at 8 p.m. that night. And we just had no idea. I checked my email every moment of every day. So we didn't get it. And they refunded, or they put the money toward, credited toward rent. But that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is facing fear, even though you're, oh my gosh, bless her heart, and not in the Southern way, but in the real way. When she woke me up, I mean, I could just hear the quaking in her voice and how scared she sounded.
Terrified.
And of course, I'm not going to yell and do all the things that her ex did. I'm not going to ever react like that. There's nothing she could do that I would yell at her and make her feel like crap. Did she make a mistake? Yeah. But it was one of those things that she was told. The information was they would move it by 7. She got up to move it. Should she have parked the car there? I mean, with all the information that she had, it would have been okay to do that, but ended up not being the right
best idea.
Right. Great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Nez, you're last on this one. What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face fear and press forward? What do you have to say?
Now I just press forward, but that didn't happen overnight. I went through a lot of experiences where I just didn't know what to do, and I would freeze into inaction. That happened so many times with abusive relationships and situations, with other dangerous situations. I used to just freeze up, whether it was just on the inside or quite literally. But after a lot of life experience, a lot of getting stronger in my personal faith, going through martial arts classes certainly contributed, and just living life and seeing that so many things that we think we're afraid of or we need to be afraid of really aren't all that. You don't need to be afraid of things as much as you think you need. I thought, anyway, I found there were many things that I was afraid of, or I thought I needed to be afraid of, that I simply don't.
Right.
And that only came by living life and seeing what came out on the other side.
Right.
So yeah, at this point, bring it on.
Yeah.
When I look back at what I've been through and I'm still here, I move on forward.
Yeah. Wow. Wonderful. Great questions, Naz. I know it's like the third, fourth time. Well, third question, so I would have said it 3 times or so. But yeah, these are great. All right. Next question. Everybody answered that. Glenn, you answered, didn't you?
No, not really.
Oh, please. What happens to you more often when experiencing fear now? Do you freeze into inaction, or do you face fear and press forward?
Oh, gee, that's a very open-ended question. I mean, with things I've experienced before, obviously I've got an idea of what to do and how I'm going to handle it. But with the things that are out of left field, I think a degree of apprehension is good, because at some point, if you're confronted with a situation, you need to be able to think clearly and don't just knee-jerk into some reaction.
Right.
You've got to, sometimes in difficult situations, you've got to prioritize what you're going to do, because it could mean the difference between life and death of you or somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
So generally, don't freeze, but be mindful of what you do first.
Right.
So that's going forward. So
that's a great point.
Like if I get bitten by a brown snake, I know that if I'm fearful, I'm dead,
Right.
because my heart's going to start pumping,
Right.
and I'm dead in probably 15 minutes.
Mm.
But if I do the right thing and attempt to keep calm, I've got a chance.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, big decisions. Hard,
Yeah.
but it's difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult,
It sure is.
for sure.
Glenn, follow-up question. Based on what you said, do you feel like there's a type of fear that is beneficial to us?
I think there is. I'd
Yeah.
say the things that, like, it's if there's 100-mile-an-hour wind blowing and you're on the top of a cliff, you don't go and look over the edge.
Right.
Like, common
Right.
sense figure. Common
It should
sense.
be. Yeah, it should be common sense. Yeah.
I mean, you can there's a level of stupidity that you see things that people do, and you shake your head in disbelief and think, well,
Right.
why did you pass that car on the hill and kill yourself with a head on?
Right. Right.
Like
Exactly.
what sort of a nincompoop takes that kind of risk?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a level where it's not courage, it's stupidity. Some of the decisions people make, for sure. And you gave a good example, trying to pass someone on a hill. Gosh, I've seen so many people risk their lives and other people's lives with stupid decisions like that. I mean, I'm not immune. I've done it in the past. In my early days of driving, I've been behind someone on a 2-lane road, and I mostly obey the lines in the road, divided line here in the West in America. If you have the divided line, it's safe to pass. If you have the double yellow line, it's not safe to pass. But it's so stupid. You get so frustrated with someone driving below the speed limit, and you want to get around them. And what are we in such an all-fire hurry about in this world, where we would risk our lives, or the people who are with you, or the people in other vehicles? I've been fortunate not to have an accident that way, but I've had a couple scary instances that have scared me into not being stupid. So, thanks for answering the question. I just, it seems like common sense that there's a part of fear. I believe there are different types of fear. There is fear that is instilled in us, that helps protect us from situations. If we're in a situation, like sometimes that dump of adrenaline to help us handle a situation, that's biological. It's something that happens. We don't really have any control over it. But it happens. Obviously, it's part of who we are in our human makeup, and it can help us and not hurt us. Anyway, there's that. All right. Next one. We're moving right through these. How do you encourage others not to be motivated by fear? Wow. How do you encourage others not to be motivated by fear? Let's go right to the source on this one. Let's ask Nez first on this. How do you encourage others, Nez, to not be motivated by fear? What do you say?
Well, every time I go live, I tell people hashtag no fear at any time, on or off the tubes. Why? Because we're not given a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. I try to deal with people individually who express some kind of fear. I try to make it relatable. If there's an experience that they're going through that I've been through, then I see that as a signal that I need to share my experience with them. I need to let them know, hey, I've been there and I'm still here. By the grace of God, I am still here. And if it can happen for me, it can happen for you. That's the top of the thing that comes to my mind.
Beautiful. Well said. What do you say, Glenn? How do you encourage if you met someone that was motivated by fear? What would you say to them?
I wouldn't say anything, because I don't. Their personality may not be in any way similar to mine, so I'm not likely to attempt to impose what I think is the way to deal with fear onto somebody else.
Okay.
Because does that make sense? That
it makes sense, but let's say someone came to you and said, Glenn, I'm in a situation, like, let's say it was money related, and that's what you do. Then they're afraid of something, and they say, what should I do here?
Well, if they ask for advice, I'm going to give it, but I'm not going to put it in terms of don't be motivated by fear.
Okay.
I'm just going to try to be rational and logical, because
Yep.
I don't see the value in identifying to somebody in that situation. Well, this is primarily because you're fearful. That doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
Let's, to my mind, get practical.
Okay.
And then that's for them to deal with ultimately.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Glenn. Yep. Let's say, Jen. Jen, how do you encourage others not to be motivated by fear? What do you say?
Gosh, I don't know how I would word this, but just encouraging them to breathe.
Yeah.
Take some breaths, and don't make a choice, like a decision, too hastily, because that's another bad habit I have, and you've seen that in action, Jason, where I start scrambling like a toy that's wound up too far.
Yeah.
And part of that is my past as well, because I was the fixer, but I was expected to fix it quick.
Yeah.
And part of it too was to end the rage.
Yeah.
You know, like he'd be screaming at me and I'd be scrambling around trying to do whatever it took to mitigate the issue. Because I would think, okay, as soon as I fix it, then the rage and the scariness goes away, and he'll be happy again. You know, so I still have this small part of me that's afraid you're going to react that way. And over time, with these things we've gone through, and you proving to me through your action that you're calm and that you're adult and you want to tackle it together in a clear and concise, healthy way, an adult way. It's helped. But there's been a few times that I've had that internal body freak out, and I get like wound up in like a split second, and I'm like, let's do this, let's do that. Oh my God. And Jason's always been good with, and I've taken some lessons from you and how you've responded and how much it's helped me. So just finding someone to breathe and not to make a decision when your body is doing all this freak out. Because I know for me, I'm not thinking clearly when that's happening internally of my body. My heart's racing and I got the cold sweats and or crying or whatever. It's just I'm not thinking as clearly, you know. And so there's been some times too that you've helped me chill, calm down.
Yeah.
And then you've had some wonderful ideas. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that because I was in freak out mode.
Yeah.
Some of it's common sense, not to diss myself, but, and then after calming down and us talking as a team, it's been very beneficial. Yeah. So just reminding someone to breathe, reminding them not to make any hasty decisions while they're in that place. And just clearing their head first. And then, and there's what is it? Wisdom in a multitude of counsel. And I think it's very beneficial to calm yourself down and then, involve people that you trust. It still comes down to your decision on how you handle it and fix the situation. But it can be very beneficial to get other perspectives.
Right. Great answer.
That's my answer. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm going to mix my answer with, Jen's talking about how I handle these situations, and it's very graceful the way she describes that. And I appreciate, it's true, but I still appreciate it. I appreciate that she sees that I'm not going to freak out. And also, Jen, before I answer, it's understandable that you have an issue with this based on what you went through before, that your desire to fix it in the moment and all of that happens. But you've gotten better about that. Yes. You have broken a lot of the programming. And when something happens, you involve me instead of trying to, handle it by yourself. And that's hard for a person to do who's programmed in the way that you were to, freak out right away.
Yeah.
So my answer is similar to Jen's. What I would tell someone is what I've learned myself. And this is another one from my mother. This is one of the many things that she helped teach me. When I would come to her with a situation and I'm freaking out a little bit, and she would always say to me, and back then it was really irritating because what I wanted at the time, was her to come up with an answer. She was my mother and I considered her in many ways wiser than me. This is someone that I could come to with certain situations, not with everything, but with certain situations. So I wanted her to, I wanted mom to make it better, and that's not what she did. But the good thing that she would say that I have taken on board, and it has made a really big impact on my life, is she would say, okay, don't freak out until you have all the information. And she would start asking questions like, do you know if this is a possibility? And she would suggest some things. And a lot of times I didn't have the answer. She said, well, you need to get all the information before you freak out. And then when you have all, she didn't say, well, when you have all the information, then you freak out. She's just saying that the situation that you're in, you may need to ask more questions. You may need to gather more information. It may not be the way the situation feels to you. It may be that there is a way out. It may be that you only have partial information and you're freaking out over partial information. That has been very helpful to me, and it is something I have integrated. So when these things that Jen describes have come up, my first instinct isn't to freak out. It's okay. I go into problem solving mode, and it's not that it makes me emotionless. Like that time that Jen described, I wasn't like, okay, we need to do this and do that. And her emotions in that moment were the most important thing to me. And then once that was calm a little bit, at least, then we can talk about options, start making calls. Okay, how are we going to get the car out of hock? For what can we do? Because we didn't have the money to do it. She's in her telling that story, rent was due that week, I believe, or the following Monday or whatever. And we were very tight with money all the time. And we've lived like that up until now for almost the better part of 2 years. And it didn't make things better for us. But even though I didn't know how it was all going to work out, I looked at the situation and I got more information. I had to find out where the car was. You need to find out, okay, is anyone willing to help? It's a spur of the moment thing that happened. And so we went into problem solving mode. And that's what I would tell someone. I would encourage them if they were to bring a situation to me, and I respect what Glenn said. You can't tell people what to do all the time. Sometimes people have to handle that. It's their situation to handle. Like I said, that I would go to my mom wanting her to fix it. Well, that was wrong of me to do. It's my issue. It's okay to ask suggestions from people. It's okay to, like Jen said, in the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. So it's okay to ask people. And I would encourage you to ask people, what should I do in this situation? Go to someone like Nez was saying that has been through a similar situation. How did you deal with this? It's totally okay. But to expect someone to fix it for you, that's the wrong mindset, in my opinion. But I would encourage them to get all the information first. Don't let the fear paralyze you into thinking that there's not a way out. It's been my experience that there is a way out, that there's very little that you face in this world that there's not some kind of way out of it. And I can't think of a situation where there's not something that can be done. And maybe you don't always know the right thing to do, but that's where talking to people helps. Someone that's not in the situation, someone that might have gone through a similar thing. They can be a great value to help you in your situation, not where they fix it, not where they make it better for you, but asking someone's opinion and helping them, with a clearer head than you, maybe look at the situation and try to, help you through it. And lastly, I would let them know, if the person came to me, I would let them know that they're not alone, that, I would be willing to do, if there's something I can do to help someone in a situation like that, when they're motivated by fear, I would try to not be fearful and try to keep a clear head and let them know that they don't have to face the situation alone. Just like with Jen. I mean, Jen's my wife, obviously. She's my best friend. So every situation that she faces, it's my situation too. And that's by choice. But I have friends that if they went through something, I would want to be there for them in whatever way I could. sometimes there's going to be nothing I can do, but I can still be encouraging and supportive, and I would try to do that best I can. I want to say hello to Paul Johnstone, who popped in the chat while we're talking. Thank you. We're glad you're here. Good to see you. Oh yes, Cripps, your mom did not knee-jerk react and fly off the handle. Don't think so. Yeah, well, sometimes when she was going through a situation, sometimes she oftentimes was do as I say, not as I do kind of situation. But that's true about a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes she reacted to a situation I was in, and it was a knee-jerk reaction, depending on what it was, for sure. Okay, everyone answered that one. All right. What is at the root of fear? What is at the root of fear? We're going to ask Nez first on this one. What is at the root of fear, Nez? What do you think?
I believe at the root of fear, and I'm coming from a Christian perspective where I believe quite oftentimes there's an actual spirit of fear, as mentioned in Scripture. And since that's not a good spirit to have, I've often found that other things can come along with it. I think doubt is a reason that fear can happen. You're doubting that the situation or circumstance that you're facing is livable or go throughable or survivable, or perchance you are you don't have the faith to just live the moment and take it as it comes. You feel maybe like a sense of inadequacy.
Right.
Sometimes I think I think that falls under doubt. Fear of doubting yourself, doubting God, doubting that the situation, that any good could possibly come from it. And I think also at the root of fear is, I guess disbelief is kind of like doubt, but they are two different things. But I think disbelief also goes with fear. You don't have a substantial spiritual path that uplifts you and holds you up and gives you that sense of peace and confidence, come what may. I think there are just people who are maybe they're more afraid of the results of what can happen. They're more afraid of the consequence of what's going on, or what it could, I guess consequence is the best word I can think of. Maybe they're a little more afraid of the consequence than the actual thing or situation they're fearful of.
Right.
I felt that way about having children. For the longest time, I didn't want to have children. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't want to do it because I was afraid. I was afraid for many reasons. The physical discomfort. Yeah. I mean, that can break out into sub reason. There's many reasons, and fear has many companions. At least it did for me in that experience.
Sure.
But I think at the root of fear is doubt and disbelief, to make a long story longer.
No, that's good. Thank you, Nez. Appreciate that. What do you think? What do you think, Jen? What is at the root of fear?
I think uncertainty.
Yeah, you stole mine.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I know for me, not knowing how things are going to play out when an issue arises, that's what gives me fear. And it kind of seems ridiculous because there's being fearful isn't going to make you know how things are going to play out any better.
Right. Right.
And usually for me, if I'm experiencing fear, my mind is going to like the worst case scenarios,
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's at the root of fear, uncertainty.
Sure.
How it's going to work out.
Yep. I'll go next because that's kind of what I was going with. I'll incorporate what Jen says with what Nez says. I do agree with Nez that disbelief can be at the bottom of fear. You don't trust the situation, or you don't trust others that are involved in the situation, or you don't trust yourself, or you don't trust God if you believe in God. If you don't believe in God, it could be the other things that I mentioned, not trusting yourself or not trusting the situation that causes the fear. I think that's a good answer. And what Jen said, the unexpected, most of the things that I have admitted that I've been fearful of is not knowing how it's going to turn out, like the getting married out of fear, thinking I'm getting older, it's not ever going to happen, I need to do this now, making decisions like that are fear-based. Like the lying, being afraid that this crazy person is going, if I don't say that he wasn't with me, that I'm afraid of the unknown. It's the unknown thing that's going to happen. What if we don't make rent and we get evicted and we end up on the street? That has come over the past 2 years. That has been a driving force. Get out of the situation that we've finally gotten out of, and thankfully we're in a completely different place now, and I'm grateful. But it's horrible to live in this place of fear. So I think there's many roots to fear, and I think that what has been mentioned by Nez and also Jen, those are prime factors of the root of fear. It's the unknown. And I'll just tell a quick story. Jen and I are watching The Chosen season 3, and I promise not to go on a long rant about how people are critical, quote unquote, Christians are critical, very critical of it's not, doctrinally correct. They put things in the wrong order, and all these things that I've heard, all these negative criticisms. It's, Dallas Jenkins is Mormon, which he isn't. If he's not Mormon, he's working with other Mormons and Jews.
I thought you weren't going to go into it.
I'm not
just kidding.
I'm not going on a long
I'm just picking on you, babe.
I know. Hey, Christ is the truth. Welcome, and also a little mystery. We're glad that both of you are here. Thanks for stopping by. I just want to say, for those of you that have heard negative things about The Chosen, it is, in my opinion, a wonderful thing. I feel like if there's anything in this world that has any light to it whatsoever, it's better than the darkness. And there are so many good things. But the quick story on last night's episode, it's one of the stories from Scripture that I love, when the disciples were in the boat and there was a storm on the sea. And they were afraid that they were going to get sunk, and they saw a figure walking across the water, and they thought it was a ghost, and it ended up being Jesus walking to them on the water. And they weren't sure, because I'm sure there was wind and waves, and it was dark, and they couldn't really make out who it was, but they recognized his voice, I guess. But Peter said, if it is you, tell me to walk out on the water to you. And Jesus said, yeah, come on. So Peter gets out on the water and starts walking to him. And as long as he kept his eyes on Christ, he did not sink. And Scripture says that he noticed the wind and the waves, and he started to sink. And it's so powerful to me, that idea. And whether people think it happened or not, it's okay, because the point is still a valid point. When we keep our eyes on something we can trust or someone we can trust, it helps us not to sink. It's the moment when we look at the circumstances around us. In this case, in this story, it was the wind and the waves that Peter looked at, and then he started to go under the water. It's such a beautiful idea, and it doesn't have to be a God. It is for me. It is something I very much believe in. But it can be any circumstance that you face, finding something that you trust. If you don't trust yourself, you can find something that you do trust, and keep your eyes on that instead of the actual situation. I think that's powerful. It helps you get through it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's several roots to fear, and it is the unknown. It is what you're focused on. You're focused on the situation itself. There's lots of things surrounding this, and people deal with it. It's a real thing. I don't like that, at least in the Christian world, people use Scripture and they make it seem like, well, Jesus said, don't fear. So if someone is experiencing fear, they get the idea that, they're sinning because they have fear. No, Jesus said the things about fear, in my opinion, because he knew that people would feel fear, and he's just trying to get them to not get stuck in that place. And of course, we're going to feel fear. Of course, there is a built-in thing in us that feels fear, and sometimes that can be a good thing. I believe it's what Jesus didn't want is for people to live in this, as Nez said. He didn't give us a spirit of fear. We're not talking about a spirit of fear. We're talking about taking that on board and living in this constant fear. It's paralyzing. It's not healthy, and it makes people make decisions out of that place that usually don't end up good. All right.
If I could add one more thing, I think one more thing about the root of fear is this sense of no control when something has come. And I think that's partly an answer to the question you asked me earlier, Glenn, is how do I know when God wants me to face something? And I maybe just re-saying what I already said. But when we realize that the situation that or circumstance that we're suddenly faced with, we have zero control. Not zero control over what we can do to deal with it, but just as it is, something happened. There it is. We have zero control over that. I think that's very scary.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Just real quick, I see in the chat they're talking about the Jesus Revolution movie. I just wanted to weigh in. I have not seen the Jesus Revolution, but I know what it is. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and in the 70s there was a movement called the Jesus movement or the Jesus Revolution, and it was essentially based on a church, Calvary Chapel, I believe. I may have that name wrong. But a pastor of the church was seeing this movement, hippies being around everywhere, and they were a lot of times in the church, they were very disliked and hated. And he decided that he was going to embrace them. And because of that, it started a movement called the Jesus Movement or the Jesus Revolution. And that movie is supposedly based on that period of time. So it's kind of a biopic of the people involved. Lenny Frisbee was at the center of that. He was a hippie / Christian and controversial character because people believe that he was homosexual and he died of AIDS. And so there's a lot of criticism within evangelical Christianity about him. You know, how can he be a Christian and be gay and all that stuff? And I'm not going to make points about that, except to say that this is one of the flaws, in my opinion, of the church, where you look at the actions of a person and you judge them, which to me is the opposite of what Jesus did. He didn't judge everyone that came. He judged the Pharisees because of their religious hypocrisy. That's what he criticized. He didn't criticize the prostitute that came to him. He just told her, you know, your sins are forgiven. Go and sin no more. It's just a very different attitude. So I haven't seen the movie. I probably won't see the movie. But you know, I just know a little bit about it, and I don't know how good it is, but you know, watch it at your own risk, I suppose. But I think with any movie that is about Christianity, I mean, one must be careful. But it's the same thing that I'm talking about The Chosen, all the criticism about The Chosen. And I think there are people that aren't watching it because of what other people are saying. You have to look at things yourself, in my opinion, and make your own decisions. Don't let other people keep you from something that might be helpful for your walk, helpful for your life. That's the only point I wanted to make. Okay. Next. Okay, last question, and then we'll go on to the surprise.
No, my turn.
Oh, sorry. What is at the root of fear, Glenn? My apologies.
That's all right. I think there's too many things to even mention. The first thing that came into my head was, what if you live in a place that's riddled with crime and people have got guns and just go and kill everybody, and your parents are shit scared, and so it's environmental. I mean, gee, that's a pretty big root of fear, I would have thought. So just the
the atmosphere.
The environment you grow up in, how your role model is huge. Some of us are a lot more fortunate than others. The other, just moving away from that, the other thing I think the root of fear is about is when people are not personally accountable to themselves, an unwillingness to be personally accountable.
Wow.
Wow.
That is a big deal.
Sure.
And I'll say something about that if you're done, Glenn.
Yes, thank you.
Having lived my life with thinking that the people around me had control over my life and not myself, and not like me and God. You're right, that exacerbated the fear, because you feel even less in control, and then you're dependent on the people around you making the best decisions for you when you're looking to other people to tell you what to do instead of trusting yourself. And I do think God gives us, wisdom to trust ourselves to an extent. We still need to look to him as believers, but I felt very out of control, which just made the fear worse. So I appreciate that, Glenn.
Wonderful. Hello to Shadow Self, who popped in. Shadow Self says, I would have enjoyed hearing more about what each of you defined courage as being for yourselves, and how being courageous has changed your perspective towards others and the world around you. I'll put that on the screen if anyone wants to answer Shadow Self's question. I think it's a great question. I would have enjoyed hearing more about what each of you define courage as being for yourselves, and how being courageous has changed your perspective towards others in the world around you. So we'll get to that question in a minute. I'll leave it on the screen for a minute so I don't forget. But we have one more question to answer, and then we probably will have a little bit of time to answer Shadow Self's question, and then we have our surprise, and then we'll say goodnight to everyone. Okay, last one. What is one of the best lessons you have learned from facing fear? What is one of the best lessons you have learned from facing fear? And I'll go first. The best lesson is to, as much as possible, to, as I mentioned, I kind of already answered a little bit, but I'll go back to it because I think it's so powerful, is to make sure to get all the information, not to have as much as possible a knee-jerk reaction, to try to remain calm, to realize that the situation may not be as bad as it might seem to you. That doesn't mean your feelings are invalid. It just means that feelings they do serve a purpose, but finding out what the reality of the situation you're in is vitally important in how you deal with it. One of the best lessons I've learned is not to freak out. And it's taken me a long time to get there, because sometimes things would happen and I would, try to go around and fix it. Kind of like Jen was talking about, probably not to the same extent she did, because I didn't have anyone lording over me in that same way. But still, I had been in lots of situations and I didn't feel like I could count on anyone. So I was the one that had to try to get myself out of it. And I learned from my own mistakes of trying to just do something. And sometimes the best thing to do to get out of a situation is to sit in it and think, and try not to make decisions out of fear. So in facing fear, I've learned to try to be calm and collected, to try to gather more information, to try to make decisions from not from a place of fear, but from a cool head, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that has been a huge help to me in my life. So very short answer, but that's my answer from that. What do you think, Nez? What is one of the best lessons you've learned from facing fear?
That there's not one thing that I go through that God doesn't know about or can't get me through.
Beautiful.
That's it right there.
Okay. Well, short and sweet. All right. Jen, what is one of the best lessons you've learned from facing fear?
That fear is a terrible motivator, especially when it comes to problem solving.
Right.
And life. Fear, I think, is a thief.
Yeah.
And I understand that there are situations that fear is a gift. If we're in a building that's burning,
Yeah.
being afraid and getting the heck out of there is a good thing. It's a terrible motivator. It's a thief.
Yeah.
And it's just better to calm down, try to center yourself, and deep breaths, and even if you need to get some help with someone to help kind of calm down your nervous system.
Yeah.
Sometimes people do all kinds of things in the moment when they feel fear to try to get themselves down off the ledge, so to speak. But I think it's very beneficial.
Sure.
So that's my answer.
Perfect. Glenn, what is one of the best lessons you've learned from facing fear?
Don't make important decisions from an emotional base.
Right.
In other words, if you're, how do I say that better? Look, when there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of stuff coming in, information overload, you feel like crap. It's been a bad day, or for whatever reason, something's happened. There's been an accident.
Sure.
If you are making decisions in that place, it's going to, pretty much to my mind, not be an informed decision. So you need to. What I've learned is to just take the time to just chill for a bit and just get to a different place, then make decisions.
Right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you. Wow.
Except the ones that I make in the moment, like we're going to leave our house in Brisbane and move. I do that in 2 seconds.
Right. Thank you.
So I'm contradicting myself, but yeah, I can live with that.
Well, we all can be contradictions for sure. Like our new friend Little Mystery said in the chat, contradictions. Sometimes the things that we do are contradictions of other things that we do. We can all be contradictions. Obviously the hope is that the more we grow and mature and recover and start to know who we are, the less of a contradiction we are. Our decisions become more fluid and more concise. That's my opinion on that. All right. We have just a few minutes to answer Shadow Self's question, and then we'll move on to the bonus, the little gift to everyone that we have. Shadow Self says, I would have enjoyed hearing more what each of you defined courage as being for yourselves and how being courageous has changed your perspective towards others and the world around you. I think it's a great question, and I'll go first. Wait, let me pull up so I can see it bigger because it's a little tiny on my screen. Just a moment, guys. I wonder how. Oh, there it is. Okay. I think some of the quotes that Nez found are very good in describing what courage is. I mean, these quotes are perfect, and I don't know, Shadow Self, if you were here to hear the reading of that, but it's in the description, and I would encourage you to read those when you have a chance. But straight from the Bible, be strong and of good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them, for the Lord thy God, it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. So that's saying don't be fearful. And I believe that courage isn't the absence of fear. It is pushing forward. And that was one of Nez's questions, pushing forward. So courage is knowing that it might be a fearful situation, but knowing that it makes the most sense to push through rather than try to go around. Now, there are certain life situations where, the best thing to do is to get out of the situation. Like someone is trying to rob you and you need to run. That is courage. It's saving your life in some instances. Another quote is, true courage is not the brutal force of vulgar heroes, but the firm resolve of virtue and reason. That's Alfred North Whitehead. So in that, the firm resolve and virtue and reason, firm resolve, being resolved in the situation, even if you're fearful, to me is courage. Moving forward, pushing through. These are all similar themes. And this one's good too. The opposite for courage is not cowardice; it is conformity. Even a dead fish can go with the flow. Jim Hightower. These are all things. But you're asking how I define courage. I define it, as I said, pushing through, even if you're fearful, pushing through the situation. Sometimes we have to know when to run. We have to know when to push through a situation and not to avoid it. sometimes avoiding situations can be cowardice. Sometimes it's life saving. Literally. So it's not always easy to tell. Like in the situation that I shared where I was robbed at gunpoint, there was a part of me that wanted to try to grab the gun or honk my horn or start driving fast and run into a car or a tree there were a number of things that ran through my mind in a short period of time, and it could have been that by me being calm, he ended up shooting me in the head. I don't know. That's not what happened. Obviously, I'm still here. So being calm was the best decision, but it could have just as easily been someone that didn't care about my life at all, and they planned on killing me from the beginning, taking the money. So I capitulated to his demands and gave him his money back. Interestingly enough, I had $150 on me that was my money. He didn't ask for that. He asked for his money. He didn't ask me. When I handed him his money, I didn't hand him my wallet. I handed him the money that I had put in my pocket that was his, that he gave to me for the ride. And he didn't touch any of the other money that I had, just coincidentally. So courage is pushing through and trying to make the best decision that you can. How it's changed my perspective towards others in the world around me. I know I've experienced fear, so I don't judge people who have fear. My best desire would be to encourage them in the ways that I can to push through the fear if possible, and to not freak out, to do all the things that we've mentioned in answering all these questions, and try to move forward as best as they can. That's my answer. Does anyone else want to answer Shadow Self's question?
I was just going to agree with your answer because you stole mine.
Okay.
I think courage is pushing through despite the feelings of fear. I think sometimes people get mixed up thinking courage is an absence of fear. And you and I've talked about that a lot, Crips.
Right.
But I think it is pushing forward, pushing through despite the fear that you feel. Right. And I love that you mentioned sometimes we avoid, but sometimes there's a healthy avoidance. Sometimes leaving or running or, sometimes it is life-saving and it's actually healthier, safer, it's better for you. But it's just figuring out which one to do.
Right.
So, and I would say, I would agree with you. And your last part of the question is just to be supportive, be a safe place for people that are going through some fear and trying to gather their courage, to be supportive, encouraging for them, helping them calm down their nervous system.
Sure.
And then, being a good sounding board to bounce ideas off of your, having them bounce ideas off of you to see if you can help them come to a solution. And I will say, I think we've all known people like this. This is not good, where you give suggestions and then you get pissed off when the person doesn't take your advice.
Yeah.
That's very frustrating because really and truly, when it comes down to it, is the person's decision whether they take your advice or not.
True.
It's their life. I think people like that are controlling and they think they know better, and they might, Yeah. But how's the person going to learn if they don't make their own decisions? Right. And then it might be a mistake, but through those mistakes, we learn things. So got to let people have their autonomy and their own agency.
Love it. Great answer. Thank you, Jen. Anyone else want to answer Shadow Self's question?
Sure.
Oh, there we go. Oh, go, Nish.
Oh, no, please, Glenn, go ahead.
I just saw courage more as having trust in yourself.
Okay. Yeah.
I like that.
Keeping it simple. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. Nez, go ahead.
I'm going to go with the John Wayne quote I cited earlier. Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. I think if we remember that fear comes to us all as part of our human experience in one way, shape, or form, whether we want to admit to it, own up to it, or not. What we all do about it is relative to each individual.
Yeah.
But truly, the best way to deal with it is just to face it and press on forward. Right. I would say that's been the way I deal with with it in my own experience in my own life, and I find that's the best way to deal with it concerning other people.
Yeah. Wonderful. All right. Thank you, guys. And thank you, Shadow Self, for your question. Hopefully that was a sufficient answer. Thank you for being willing to ask the question. Appreciate
I
that
wouldn't mind
very
hearing
much.
their answer if they'd be willing to share it. I'd
Yeah,
love to
I'd
hear it.
like to. Me too.
Yeah, I would definitely. So, Shadow Self, if you're still here, please put your answer. How would you answer your own question? I think that's a fair question. All right, so we do have a few minutes left, and in that time, you're welcome, Shadow Self. We always like questions, and thank you for being willing to ask it. As I said, appreciate it. All right, so it is Glenn's birthday tomorrow, and for a rare opportunity, he has opened himself up to a couple of questions, and I am just delighted by that. I think that people really like Glenn and they want to hear more from him, and he does share a lot in answering some of the questions, but it's his birthday, and we don't want to make too big a deal out of it, but we wanted to just ask him some questions. So thank you, Glenn, for being willing to answer a few things. So on your birthday, the first question that came to mind is, what is your earliest birthday memory? As far back as you can go, what do you remember the first birthday, whether it's a celebration or you just remember the day itself? Did your family make a big deal about your birthday? Was it not a big deal? But what's your first birthday memory, Glenn, if you can share that?
Well, I think I should say that this birthday ends with a 0 and it's got a big number in front of it, like a 7. So.
That was up to you whether you wanted to share that.
I know you left it open. I thought, well, yeah. People say you're only as old as you feel, and it's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I notice it going out on the road. I don't really feel like running anymore.
Right. Well, you've done a lot of work around your house, though. You're still very active, from what I understand.
Yeah. So, that's a bloody creeps ask these weird questions.
I don't think it's that weird. It's your birthday.
I know it's not weird. It's me trying to think what's the first birthday. Oh my. Well, I know my mother particularly was always really good, like really was into this sort of stuff. But I think from a pretty early age, I didn't bother too much. It was never that relevant to me. So I'm going to have to say I don't really remember the first one.
Okay.
Other than the older I got, the more low key it got.
Right.
So for me to even have said to you it was my birthday took a lot of courage.
Oh, yeah.
And it's probably on Facebook, so
well, it probably is, but
yeah. So I'm gonna have to pass on that. Give me something else.
Sure. So when you did have a birthday, you said it was kind of low key, but traditionally in the West, usually when we're kids, we have friends come over, and when there's a cake and there's the opening of presents. Was that different for you in your childhood? Did you have kind of
different?
Can you describe what it was like?
I think I only ever had one birthday party per se where there was a few friends came over, but I didn't. Being an introvert, I felt pretty uncomfortable with it. So generally, I'd get a present or two, and Mum would make a birthday cake, and that'd be it.
That'd be it.
No specific celebration or stuff like that. Oh, and of course, your grandparents would give you a couple of dollars for a present.
Yeah.
Be kind and generous, the usual sorts of stuff, and you put it in your money box. And but not when I hear, it's a big thing, birthdays. It's never been really that way for me. No.
Okay. You mentioned that you're turning 70. So if you can think of something, what would be the biggest thing you've learned in the years that you've been on the earth? What was, if you knew that you were going to leave this world tomorrow, what thing would you want people to know from your experience over these almost?
I think
70
this is a real easy one.
Okay.
Coming from the word or the words of an introvert is that people matter. People do actually matter, and
Oh,
it took me a very long time to come to that conclusion, but it sticks very heavily in my mind.
wow.
That's good stuff.
I'm speechless.
Yeah, that was a quick answer, right? I did well there.
You did well. People matter. I think that's huge. People do matter. Okay. I could come up with more questions, but I want to be fair to the rest of the panel. But first, I want to say hello to Wisconsin Greg, who popped in the chat. He's a friend of the show and a friend that Nez brought over, who is now also a member of the True Story Live family. So welcome, Wisconsin Greg. We love you. All right. Does anyone else want to ask Glenn a question on his birthday? So I feel like everything is open. You can ask him any question you want, and he can choose not to answer, I suppose. But
No, that's totally
That's not
There's
allowed.
no question that you can ask me that I'm going to falter on.
yeah, go ahead, Nez or Jen.
Oh,
Ask.
I didn't
Glenn a
realize we were
question.
going to get. Okay, I don't have one prepared. Sorry. I
You
thought
don't
you were
have
coming up with all the questions.
No, I can. I mean, I can ask other questions, but I didn't want to just hog the limelight. If
Oh,
either
I
of you,
appreciate that.
this is your opportunity to ask. It's his birthday, and he said that he was open to having a little dialogue, and
Yeah.
to answer some questions. So,
Well, I don't know if Nez would want to go first, and I can think.
yeah, Nez, do you have any question that you would like to ask Glenn on his birthday?
Certainly.
All right. There you go.
Glenn, what was your favorite birthday you've had so far? Mine was last year. Mine just get better every year.
The most recent one, because that means I'm still alive.
Right.
Hallelujah. All right. Good answer. Good answer. One more question. What kind of cake, if you could have any kind of cake that you wanted? Or it doesn't have to be cake, but, traditionally we have cake here in the States. What kind of cake do you want for your birthday, Glenn?
If I could have a cake, I would, and my mother was still alive, I'd ask her to make a sultana cake.
Sultana cake?
Yeah.
What's that?
Ooh.
Well, sultana, I think you call sultanas raisins.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Raisin
okay.
cake. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, whereas we have raisins and sultanas and currants.
Oh, okay.
They're all different.
And is there? Excuse my ignorance, but is there frosting and is it what like I'm trying to picture?
No icing.
Oh,
no icing. I don't like it. It's too sweet.
Okay. All right. So we know from what you've said that you don't make a real big deal out of your birthday, but I like Nez's question. Is there a particular birthday that you remember more than others? But did you ever go on a trip on your birthday that was memorable for you? Were you ever in a different country, or did you go on one of your journeys during your birthday?
I would probably think that for the majority of the time, I would have been home on my birthday because even though Sandra and I would travel of a year, we would probably travel 6 months a year for a long time, like more than a decade.
Oh, wow.
But we would always be doing it through it'd probably be split. We'd do one big one like 3 months and then 4 months and then probably a couple others.
Right.
But it would be dependent on my work, and we would generally be in the Northern Hemisphere other than if we were in Africa or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And that would be during the winter because we'd never go places. We'd never travel in the summer in the Northern Hemisphere summer. So we were away. I remember we were away for Christmas 10 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
So that says something. So we weren't here.
Okay.
We would have come home in January or February probably.
All right.
See, because we haven't been even though since Sandra had her stroke 14 years ago, we've still done a fair bit of travel, but it has dropped off, obviously, considerably.
A little bit limited.
To the point where she's now not really able to go anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's right.
Okay. All right. This can be the last question if you want. But I was thinking, well, no, two questions. One question is, if you could give yourself any gift on your birthday, what would it be, if anything? Is there anything that you don't have that if you could have the one thing on your birthday as a gift, whether from yourself or from someone else or universe or whatever, what would it be?
Your mother being alive.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Wow. Okay.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, but you got me now. I'm lost it.
Yeah. That's a wow. And that's a gift that would be given to more than just yourself. Obviously, my mother I believe she's still out there somewhere. Yeah, it would be a gift to a lot of people to have her back. And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, it's
okay.
amazing, things. I was just going to say, it's amazing the things in your life that you really respond emotionally to, and a lot of times you don't realize what you feel until they're not here,
Right.
and because when they're not, it makes you. It can be very reflective, and
Yeah.
I even thought, well, how would I, like, your mum's been dead for quite a while, and we had been together for a long time. But I
Yeah.
thought, how would I deal with someone if I saw them for the first time in 20 years?
Yeah.
Like, it's a very interesting question. I mean, I'm
is.
sure there's
Yeah.
lots of people in this situation. What would I say?
Yeah.
And I sort of contemplated it, and I thought I'd use a range of 4-letter words on her, or just give her a hug. And I'm not a hugger, so.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or maybe I'd just say, look, it's just wonderful to see you, or something like
Yeah.
that. But I had thought about it. Don't worry.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Thank you, Glenn, for your being open to this. And one last question, and then we'll finish up and we'll say goodnight to everybody. Thank you guys for being a part of tonight's broadcast on Glenn's birthday. We appreciate it. So this one is 70. Next year is 71. So over the next year, if we do this again on your 71st birthday, is there anything that you hope that you can say that happens, any kind of changes that you would make, or anything that you would like to have in a year that you don't have now?
I really, there's so many people who doing it way tougher than myself. So my thoughts are more directed to their well-being, and
Sure.
specifically Sandra. And I keep saying it. I mean, if I could share some of her burden,
Yeah.
I would willingly do so.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, but
Right.
if I could have a wish, I'd put that up there.
Well, I had an idea that something like that would be your answer, but I just want you to know that you being with her every day and being with her in that is sharing her burden as much as possible. I know what you mean, and you can't take away her pain necessarily or make things easier for her as far as the damage that's been done to her body, but you being there with her in that, in my opinion, is bearing some of the burden.
Oh, I would think that's true, but when I think about every day how difficult it is for each of us, then I think, oh my goodness, on the scale, there's just so many other people that we never really give a thought to, that are just probably the next door neighbour or
Right.
or whoever, just that we so don't even think about others. I think,
Right.
having this scenario put on me, and Sandra has really changed my attitude.
Yeah.
I just, it's so easy when things are going well that the last thing you think of is the adversity that other people go through. But I think having it in your face really, it does. I think it does change you, and I think it makes your attitude towards others so much more considerate, empathic, and I think it really is. In some respects, it's a blessing. Even though it's hard to think that it could be, but I think these things do come along, and for a reason. and you've got to be philosophical. You either get on with it or you give up. You've only got two choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And there was one other question. Would you rather have wonderful parents who pass too soon or horrible parents your whole life? Well, that for me is an easy one. I'll take the wonderful parents. Thank you.
Me too. That is an easy one, but it's an awful one as well. All right. Well, Glenn, you did it. Thank you for answering the questions. That's all I had for you. Of course, I could have thought of a lot more, but I thought just a few just little questions, and appreciate your answers and for sharing your birthday with us. It means a lot. So
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Hopefully I'm here next year.
Yeah, me too. I hope you're here. Universe willing, Shadow Self did answer the question. We'll close in just a second. Shadow Self says, what I define courage as: seeking out what you really believe in for your own value system, living within that through integrity, in all caps, and standing up in that without forcing others to believe it. Beautiful. That's a beautiful answer. I think that's very well said. And it kind of goes in line a little bit with what Glenn said, and seeing it in yourself, seeing courage, believing in yourself. That seems to be part of it. You've added through integrity, which I think a person that is introspective and they are believing in themselves, I think integrity can come through that. I guess not necessarily. But the part that I respond most to in your comment, Shadow Self, is the end, which is, and standing up in that without forcing others to believe it. Yeah, forcing others to believe anything doesn't work, in my opinion. You can't force anyone to believe. Either someone believes or they don't. And trying to force someone to believe anything is fruitless. And of course, we can look at history and see, people being forced to believe something or forced to worship a king or a leader. They're waiting for a moment to revolt. It's not done out of choice. And thankfully, I believe in a God that doesn't force anyone to believe. He knows more than we do that he can't, and that we all have choice, and that people will come to him out of their own choice, and it won't be forced. Every knee will bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God, through Christ, and it will not be forced. It will be all in all. God will be all in all, and that is the belief that I've come to through a lot of study and through a lot of doctrine and dogma, and through a lot of change, and through a lot of seeking. And it is a peace that passes all understanding, and coming to that realization. I no longer struggle with all the things that people seem to argue about and point fingers and judge each other because we don't believe the same thing. It is a beautiful thing. And so having that in my life, or a person that has that in their life and they realize that, I definitely encourage people to think about that. All right. We'll finish with reading the end of Nez's write-up. Nez says, at this stage in my life, I now know it is okay to acknowledge that fear exists. Amen. But I do not have to be driven by it. Now I see it as an opportunity to learn and grow, even if it involves hard yards. I believe everything happens or is allowed to happen for a reason. And there's not one thing I go through that God does not know about or can't get me through. My children are proof of that. And then Nez ends with a quote. Quote, it is only through labor and painful effort, by grim energy and resolute courage, that we move on to better things. That one's by Theodore Roosevelt. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being a part of tonight's broadcast. This has been True Story Live, Take Courage, written by our family friend and Nez Lover, Marisa. Thank you, Marisa, for all the work that you put into this, and the lovely quotes and the great questions, and also being transparent and sharing part of your difficult story. It's all meaningful. It is a gift that you're giving to us on the panel and to everyone that's listening. For everyone in the chat, if you visited and were with us here in the chat, we appreciate you. Everyone listening to the playback, we also appreciate you. we do invite you to be part of the chat in the conversation, but we know that there are, as Nez says, lurkers who listen, and sometimes they're listening to the live show, but they don't want to say anything. We definitely understand that, but we would love to invite you to come into the chat and share your answers with us, share your stories with us, tell us how you're doing. All of that is welcome. The door is always open. So thank you for that. Good night, everyone. We're grateful that you were here. Hope everyone has a good week. Join us again next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another episode of True Story Live. And we'll pass it over to Jen. Jen, if you would, take a minute to say goodbye. If you have any closing comments, please.
All right. This was a beautiful write-up, Nez. Beautiful. Loved your vulnerability. Loved everybody's, and especially the chat. And I think this is an important topic. I really, really do. Fear especially. I think it comes across sometimes as this taboo thing. It's something that we seem to not want people to know that we have.
Yeah.
But it's just one of the most basic human feelings, and I think it's great to talk about this stuff, the things that we share on and talk about on the show. So thank you to everyone in the chat for joining us. I hope you guys have a great week. If you have any prayer requests, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can email Crips if it's more personal. We'd love to pray for you. Happy birthday, Glenn. Thank you for sharing your answers, and we love getting to know you better and better. Have a great night, guys. Sleep well. God bless.
Thank you, Jen. Glenn, if you could take a minute to say goodbye to everyone on your birthday. If you have any closing comments, please make them.
Sure, even on my birthday, I'll have to live in fear, because if I don't get Coco and Chandra's lunch soon, I'm going to Thanks. Good night. It's not that bad, but it sounded funny.
It was funny.
It's funny.
Good night.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, and happy birthday. I hope this is a good birthday for you, and I hope for many more for you. So thank you. Nez, if you could close us off and make any closing comments that you would like to make, say goodbye to the people, and take us out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Thank you to everybody who watches the replay. And please do take a moment to share it out on your social media if you're so inclined to do. It is a common human experience, and it is good to remember that no matter what happens, it's not forever, and whatever comes along can certainly be gotten through one way or another. I totally believe that. And as somebody else said tonight, if you need help, ask for it, and don't be ashamed. My mother always said, if you need help, to ask for it. Never be. Her exact quote is, "Never be afraid to ask questions." So I think that would have been my mother's contribution to our conversation tonight. She also said, make sure to put on your lipstick before you leave the house, because you never know who you're going to meet. So,
you hear that, Glenn?
Words of wisdom from my mother.
Okay, I've only got nail polish. Will that do?
No, crap.
Make sure it matches your lipstick, though, Glenn. It's got to match.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Happy birthday, Glenn. I love you. And don't die on me yet until I get a chance to come there and meet you. And I'm a hugger, so you say you're warned. There you go.
Watch out.
Watch out. All righty.
I'll have to get the barbed wire out.
Better barbed wire than brown snakes. So anyway,
we'll get some cord for you so you can look in the basket.
Thanks again, everybody, for being here. Please make sure you have the bell rung so you'll know next time we go live on next Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us, and what a great show. Thank you, everybody, for contributing. God bless and good night.